So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Yesterday, we were basically also doing Surah Al-Araf, but we left off right at this ayah. So, let's see where we're at. We are at this ayah, and which basically tells us we're in ayah number 4. Remember, when you do the numbering, you're going to look at the last number right there. So this is ayah number 3, this is ayah number 2, this is ayah number 1. So the numbering is basically at the end. Okay, and this is where we left off at. We left off وَكَم مِّن قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. But let's just look at a couple things. So we talked about haraj the day before, and yesterday we talked about the shadda and some of the meanings of shadda. Okay, and we said some of the meanings of shadda is basically to indicate repetition. Other meanings of shadda is to indicate a gradual process of something. Another meaning for shadda is to indicate the stress of something, or like a hyperbole or exaggeration. All right, so that's another meaning for the shadda. And certainly when we're speaking about ittabi'u, that basically may put us in a picture for the root tabi'a, and tabi'a means to follow or to trace. So ittabi'u, what is needed of us as Muslimin, since it says ittabi'u ma unzila ilaykum min rabbikum, is basically one, not to just follow, but grow gradually in our deen. Number 3, to repeat. There's a lot of repetition in the deen, and that is crucial in order to make an identity. So you pray 5 times a day. You do the same thing the second day. You do the same thing the third day. There's a repetition of different actions or different words or different behaviors that you would do throughout the night, throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, and throughout your life. So that's why when you look at ittabi'u, it's telling us that discipline must go in a course of repetition, must go in a course of being gradual and growing slowly. And number 3, must go and grow in a course where you are stressing on it and you're really keen on overcoming your comfort zone. And this is extremely important. Every single type of success is always targeting your comfort zone. And whenever you try to overcome the comfort zone, that's when you become successful. Whether that was in your dunya matters, you probably going against your comfort zone and studying hard, or probably maybe going against your comfort zone and working hard, or probably, body working hard, and etc. Everything is all about going out of your comfort zone. Same thing when it comes to Islam itself. It's going out of your comfort zone for probably Salat al-Fajr, for probably your comfort zone and taking off maybe your hijab, but putting on the hijab and getting out of the comfort zone in feeling probably cool, when probably feeling that the wind is blowing through your hair and all of that, but you're going out of your comfort zone for the sake of la ilaha illallah. Same thing with each and every single thing. Every single thing, it's all about stamina. It's all about insisting on something and determination. So اتبعوا ما أنزل إليكم من ربكم ولا تتبعوا من دونه أولياء, and do not follow other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's awliya. And we talked about the word awliya, and we said it basically is referring to the ones that you would follow, or the ones that you would turn to in decision making, or the ones that you would turn to as centers in your life, metaphorically, or the ones that would basically be the ones that you would find support through. And certainly Al-Qurtubi was indicating that the ones that you would engage with, and the ones that you would consider as your circle of friends, your circle of support, your circle of probably seeking even decisions and seeking perhaps maybe education from or indoctrination from, that's going to be your awliya. And this is extremely important to keep in mind, because right now we're living in an era, especially when it comes to, students that go to college, they would be indoctrinated to thinking that, hey, only what we would see is presented as science is what we're going to consider as the truth. And then later on, right now, we're seeing that there were certain people that were also playing with the resources, and not everything that is displayed as if it is science is necessarily factual. Anyhow, that's a different story. So, قليلا ما تذكرون. There was one thing as I was going over the tafsir, I would study the tafsir before presenting it, and then I would restudy what I had presented to make sure that there was one, accuracy in what I said. Number two, in case I missed something. And of course, جل من لا يسهو. So قليلا ما تذكرون. There was a point that البقاعي had said that other mufassirin did not say. And he focused on the word قليلا ما تذكرون. And he said that the way that it said قليلا ما تذكرون in a statement that was focused on اتبعوا, follow, and do not follow other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as awliya. He said the word قليلا ما تذكرون. It didn't say قليلا ما تفعلون or قليلا ما maybe تؤمنون. It didn't say that. It said تذكرون. He said قليلا ما تذكرون. And the way he connected it with اتبعوا, he said that there are certain, remember what we were talking about yesterday, that there's a certain data that is stored in you, and that data that is stored in you is basically something that you may not remember it in your brain because it's data stored in you, but you don't really recognize it. And he said, when it said اتبعوا ما أنزل إليكم, that doing a certain behavior, it basically, it's kind of like it removes, he didn't say that literally, but it's kind of like removing the dust off that data, off those records, and basically bring it to life. He didn't say that literally, but he was focusing on قليلا ما تذكرون. He said the word تذكرون is indicating that something becomes to your awareness. So in other words, your action, your behavior, and what you do, it brings a lot of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stored within you from being a Hanif, from being a person of fitra. It basically revives it. So when you look at تذكرون, he was saying that the behavior by following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's instructions, by following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words, and by following the Prophet's teachings, by following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had instructed, that is what is going to revive. And then therefore he wanted to say تذكرون is more of reviving than actually remembering. So that's what his emphasis was. His emphasis was your behavior and you following the instructions and the directions or the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what will enlighten the data that is stored in you /fitra, and that's what will revive your identity, revive you, revive the stored data in you, and the best of that data to basically make you a person of purification, a person of truth, a person of dedication, and a person that is turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a mu'min. And he said, قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Why did he say قَلِيلًا? Because not very many people will have the stamina, will have the grit to actually have that determination and confidence to follow the path, because definitely it needs a couple different, let's call them therapy sessions. And when we say therapy sessions, we're actually looking at the shadda, and the shadda is letting us know that this therapy requires dedication, requires repetition, requires gradual growth, requires determination, and requires that you would have the stamina to continue furthermore. So that's what the shadda is basically indicating, but that's not enough, because another thing, قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ, is also letting us know that when it says وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا مِن دُونِهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ, that the majority of the people, when it said قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ, that the majority of the people will basically be, I guess, I would say, victims to, I wouldn't necessarily mean victims to mean, they're not held accountable, but majority would be following the indoctrination, the trend that everyone is practicing, and then they become nothing but followers. And that's where that awliya is coming in. The awliya is letting us know that most people will take the decision making, or will take the center, or will take the trend, or will take the support from what most people are basically following, which really traces back all the way to shaitan. Traces back all the way to shaitan. Very few people will recognize, one, where these people's paths are tracing to. Very few people will recognize that they're going to be determined and with strict. And I want you to look at the shadda again, because shadda can indicate something is exaggerated, can indicate hyperbole, can indicate all of the above. So when you say قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ, that's letting us know that very few people make it to this level of remembrance. Very few people make it to this level of dedication. Very few people make it to this level where it is going beyond just a gradual process. Most people will still be in their gradual process, in their baby steps, perhaps maybe forever. So قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ, those that manage to grow from the milestone of a baby step to another milestone of probably being a mu'min, a person being of dedication, etc. Very few people make it to that level of تذكرون, not تذكرون, but تذكرون. Again, that shadda again to indicate the same thing. Very few people make it to that level where they are, one, in severe remembrance because of the shadda. Remember, it can mean a hyperbole, can mean stress, can mean exaggerated. But in Lugha Arabiya, when we say exaggerated, it's different than English, because in English, if you were to say exaggerated, that's a way of saying that something is rhetorically appearing bigger than what it really is. But in Lugha Arabiya, صيغة المبالغة can mean a hyperbole and can mean as a way of stressing the momentum, or stressing the amount in it, or stressing to express the magnitude of something. Just keep that one in mind, because when we say exaggerated in English, the connotation is rather not giving us that this is actually a good thing. Because if you say something exaggerated, the connotation is that this is something that doesn't really reflect the reality of what it really is. It is more of a blown up hyperbole to somehow give a rhetorical expression. But in Lugha Arabiya, that is necessarily not the case. In Lugha Arabiya, mubalagha, just like the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're all in sighat mubalagha. They're all in the harmony of mubalagha, which basically is In English, we would translate it as exaggerated, but in اللغة العربية صيغة المبالغة does not mean that this carries a connotation that it is exaggerated to mean that it does not reflect truth, but it is to show the magnitude of something. This is extremely important because all the names, almost all the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Quddus, Al-Aziz, Al-Jabbar, look at the word Al-Jabbar, Al-Mutakabbir, all of them, they would actually be considered as صيغة مبالغة, but this is not to express whatsoever something that is far from reality and more of a hyperbole, but it is to express magnitude of something. Keep that one in mind. This is to express the magnitude of something. So when you say قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ and not تَذْكُرُونَ, the difference, if you were to say قَلِيلًا مَا تَذْكُرُونَ, very few would just remember. But تَذَكَّرُونَ with that shadda is giving me the stress on that kaf right there to let me know تَذَكَّرُونَ to mean that very few people make it to the stage of being in full remembrance, or very few people make it to the stage of being in full dedication. Very few people make it to the stage of being in full commitment. This is what that shadda would tell me. Because if we were to say قَلِيلًا مَا تَذْكُرُونَ, it's going to give me a different meaning to just say, well, very few people would remember. But this is giving me another stress, another level of stress right there. Okay, وَكَمْ مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. All right, that's where we left off at. Let's look at this ayah. وَكَمْ مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ. And of course, we know that in لغة عربية, when we say كم, the word كم من قرية أهلكناها, just the word كم can come in as an istifham, like an interrogative clause. So if I were to say كم تفاحة عندك, I'm asking you how many apples do you have. But this isn't asking a question. So when we say كم من قرية أهلكناها, كم من تفاحة عندك, that كم من تفاحة عندك, then I'm basically expressing a magnitude of something. I'm letting you know that this is a large amount of apples, or this is a large amount of whatever I'm basically right there trying to express in this situation. And that's why you could see Al-Qurtubi was saying, well, كم للتكثير. Said this is to express the magnitude of something. So what is the ayah? Let's first give it a surface translation. And how many cities had we destructed, and then our might had come to them during their sleep, or during their time of rest, actually, or during their sleep, or during their naps. Okay, so that's just a surface translation. Is this asking a question? Is this an interrogative clause? No, it is not an interrogative clause. So what is it? Well, this is talking about giving us a magnitude, that there were many nations that had at one point basically reached a very good level of perhaps what we would today call civilization, or what we might call modernity, or we might call something that they had built and grown to a certain level. So this ayah is letting us know that there were all these nations, all these cities. But notice that it didn't say وَكَمْ مِنْ أَهْلِ قَرْيَةٍ. It said وَكَمْ مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ. So why would it say كم من قرية, even though it's not the city that necessarily got destructed, it's the people of the city. The city remained. So biggest evidence is that their remains are still there. The city is still there. If you were to go to Al-Ahqaf, it's still there. You were to go to the pyramids are there, but the people are gone. They're all dead. There's no one there, but the pyramids still stand. So why would it say كم من قرية أهلكناها? The qarya is in itself the city. What does a qarya mean? A qarya means village. Okay, A qarya means village, but this isn't necessarily talking about the village as a place, a geographical site. This is actually talking about what makes up that village. What makes up the village is basically the people. What makes up the village is basically all the effort put within that village. We're talking about perhaps maybe the effort to make this village, maybe the economical prosperity, perhaps maybe the political power that they had, perhaps maybe the social relations that they lived in, and the list goes on and on. Okay, so this is referring to the people that lived in that qarya, and this is very common in Lugha Arabiya that one word can actually be used, but what is really needed is not necessarily the city itself, for example, but this is actually talking about what resides within all of this, what basically is contained. And that's very similar to this ayah, وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنَ الْقُرُونِ مِنْ بَعْدِ نُوحٍ, and how many were destructed throughout the centuries after Prophet Nuh. Is this talking about the century itself getting distracted? No, this isn't talking about the century itself, but this is talking about in a reflection of a magnitude of how many nations living throughout different generations had been distracted throughout these times, that after Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, in how many nations, how many cities, how many people, generations after generations, living through basically these different eras, but they were basically under the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a result of leaving the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were basically destructed. Okay, so now we see what's the opposite of kam? What is the opposite of kam? It's basically rubba. So remember the ayah, رُبَّمَا يَوَدُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. All right, here we go. This is rubba. All right, but in Surah Al-Hijr, it didn't say رُبَّمَا, even though there's another qira'ah that says رُبَّمَا. Okay, but in Hafs an Asim, it's رُبَّمَا. It's basically with no shadda. Okay, now rubba is basically just a little. It's the opposite of kam, which basically is to reflect magnitude. This is to reflect a different thing, not the magnitude, but perhaps, I don't know what the word is in English, but it's to reflect basically a minimum of something, the minimum, or to minimize something. Okay, now let's continue right there. So, وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنَ الْقُرُونِ مِنْ بَعْدِ نُوحٍ. And of course, what is الهلاك anyway? So when we say كَمْ مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا, هَلَكَ is the root. What is هَلَكَ? هَلَكَ, number one, it can mean to destroy. هَلَكَ could also mean that this thing that basically halak, it used up all its effort or all its energy or all its potentials. That could also mean halaka. Halaka could also mean to die. Halaka, so let's see, three things. Halaka can mean to use up all the energy and or potentials. Halaka could also mean to die, and halaka could also mean to destroy. So when you look at كم من قرية أهلكناها, one, they used up all their potentials. Two, they were destructed. Three, they perished or died. Okay, so when we say كم من قرية أهلكناها, did they have the resources? They had the resources. What is the evidence that they had the resources? Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَلَقَدْ مَكَّنَّاكُمْ, right there. They had the resources. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not destruct you unless He gives you the resources, and these resources are basically privileges that you have to use and channel them in where they belong. You choose not to do that, then that will result in your own destruction. Remember, in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically let us know that وَمَن يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ. You do something wrong, the punishment will basically come from the same direction and or opposite direction, but it will basically come to give you that punishment from or as a result of what you had committed. You basically were lying too much or probably not being trustworthy. What you're going to be losing is people's trust in you. What you're going to be losing is people giving you a word of truth, and what you're going to be losing is your own self, because people are then not going to take you as a place that they can depend on, or probably a place that they can trust, and then therefore you're going to continue losing privileges because من استعجل الشيء قبل أوانه عوقب بحرمانه. You rush something before its time, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish you by taking it away from you. By taking it away from you. So when you look at these people, did they have the potentials? They had the potentials. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us. وَلَقَدْ مَكَّنَّاكُمْ. Yes, indeed, it didn't say مَكَّنَّاهُم, but it was, in other ayat, it was saying, وَلَقَدْ مَكَّنَّاهُم فِي مَا إِن مَكَّنَّاكُمْ فِيهِ. We had given them the potentials, the same type of potentials that you yourself are given, but they used it in a wrong way. They misused it. They didn't use it to get to Jannah. They basically used it for continuing and thinking that that would give them the power, or give them eternity, or give them basically the prosperity. They were seeking this dunya. مِنْكُمْ مَا يُرِيدُ الدُّنْيَا مِنْكُمْ مَا يُرِيدُ الْآخِرَةَ. So when you look at أهلكناها, that is to indicate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them the potentials, but they didn't use it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then this فجاءها, it didn't say ثم جاءها, it said فجاءها. What's the difference between ثم and the letter fa? If you say ثم جاءها, that would actually mean that there was a time lapse and then it happened. But the word fa, or the letter فجاءها, that actually can mean a couple meanings. The word فجاءها this fa can be as an explanatory fa called fa السببية, to tell us that this is the reason why they basically had البأس. What is البأس? البأس basically means the power, the destruction. That's البأس, or even the war. Okay. So that was the first explanation of the letter fa. The first explanation for the letter fa, it can be an explanatory fa. The second meaning for the letter fa, it can be that this is talking about a time that there was no time lapse. So it was automatically. It was right away. There was no time lapse, and it happened right away. But here's one thing. Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punish people right away after committing a sin? No, he does not. So why then would you say that this is talking about a direct or a fast or an expedited type of a punishment, if somebody wanted to say that the fat was showing that this is expedited, or that this basically came fast or swiftly, or there was no time lapse? All right. Sometimes the ayat might use the letter fa to show something being expedited as not expedited, meaning before they even had shown resistance or resilience, or basically going against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But sometimes it is to express that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's timing is different than your timing, and therefore the punishment came sooner than they had expected. Sooner than they had expected. So when you say the fa to mean expedited, that would be, well, it was sooner than they had expected. So therefore, this would be very different from thumma, because thumma would give them some time lapse. It was basically something that took some long time until it happened. So how many years are we talking about with the letter fa compared to the letter thumma? It depends on the action. It doesn't necessarily mean that, yeah, is it seconds, is it minutes, is it days, is it years, etc. But you want to keep in mind that when you calculate the history of, or history in terms of, let's say, countries, civilizations, the timing that you would use is different than the calculation you would use for one person's span. So what does this look like? You, as a human being, you live up to 75 years, 80 years, 90, congratulations, all right, if you live that long. But when it comes to civilizations, 200, 300, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and of course, historians, and they basically had different explanations of how civilizations would grow and then end in age. Okay, so some scholars, just like Ibn Khaldun, a Tunisian scholar, he basically said that civilizations exactly like the generations in human generations. So this would basically so this would mean that they start out as a baby and then they put the effort and then they grow in power. And then the second generation, this is what Ibn Khaldun basically says, then the second generation doesn't realize the efforts that the first generation had put in. So they basically then feel entitled. They feel entitled to taking all of this, and then they end up abusing that entitlement. And then they start, of course, in the third generation, they basically don't recognize that there's supposed to be any effort to put in, to invest. And that's how when civilizations would basically start degenerating little by little. And then by the fourth stage, that's when they get defeated. Okay, that's when they get defeated. So you would say same thing right now with some historians are actually talking about Israel, that at one point when you're talking about Ben Gurion, you're talking about Golda Meir, you're talking about those generations, they put a lot of effort, regardless you liking it or you don't, but they put a lot of effort to basically making that foundation of this terrorist country, Israel. And then later on, they started degenerating. And right now you're seeing those that are in the army are right now not wanting to join the army. Of course, I mean, right now they're so used to all the entitlement that, hey, wait a minute, we're supposed to be getting it without any effort. What do you mean put our lives on the sword right now and putting our lives at stake? No, we're not going to do that. Something has to be figured out from out there. And that's why Israel is actually inviting people from China, from India, and from different parts of the world. And right now, of course, what is that country? Forgot what it was called. An African country says, if you want us to join, we're ready to join. I think it was Ghana or something. I forgot what country.
Uganda.
Uganda, there you go. It's like, hey, well, we're happy to
But
join.
it's because there's like a Christian Zionist church there. So it's coming from that particular church.
Absolutely, absolutely. So at the end, we would say that, we're talking about the rise and the fall of nations, and that this is very important to see. وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا. Of course, أهلكناها, whether it overused its potentials for the wrong cause, or whether this is talking about that it was perished, or whether this was talking about that it was destructed. So all of those would actually be included in the word أهلكناها, فجاءها, and now we're saying that fat right there. So if we are saying that this is fat sababiyya, to mean that this is the explanatory fat, then in that situation, if we were going to put a punctuation mark, then we would put right before فجاءها, then we would put a semicolon right there, because that would explain فجاءها بأسنا, meaning after they had abused their resources and not use it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when they were destructed. And then فجاءها بأسنا would explain that the reason why they were destructed is because they basically had rejected using their resources in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had instructed, and therefore they perished as a result of that. So فجاءها بأسنا. The word ba's can mean one, can mean war, can mean power, might, can also mean any type of might that you might be talking about as overcoming you. So al-ba's can also mean poverty, by the way. So keep that one in mind. Can also mean poverty and can also mean any type of distress. All right. So when you look at فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا, is this talking about a famine coming in? Is this talking about some kind of a tornado coming in or some kind of an earthquake? Or what today we would probably use something and say natural disaster, but it's actually Ba'sullah. What you called a natural disaster, they attribute it to nature and basically considered nature is God. But for Allah, for us, and for us that believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't call it natural disaster, but we would call it that it's basically a ba'sullah. It's a ba's coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. So why indicate and why talk about فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا right now? Why speak about that now? Talking about it now, فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا is really to indicate that when they thought that they had reached the climax of figuring out civilization, figuring out basically prosperity, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically shown them that His power is basically above all. And فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا بَيَاتًا. What is bayatan? Remember the word bait? All right, everybody knows the word bait. The word bait comes from the root bata. Okay, let me write that down. I'm going to write it down. All right, so here's the word bait. It actually comes from the root bata. The word bata actually has a couple meanings. Number one, the word bata can actually show and indicate that something resulted in something. Can also mean bata, that it eventually happened and mostly bata overnight. Okay. The other meaning for bata is to be home. So bata, to be home. And that's where the word bait comes from. The word bait comes from home. Home is, well, if you're bata, it's to let you stay, whether you're leaving something overnight or whether you are basically residing somewhere. That's bata and bait. Okay, so when you say جاءها بأسنا بياتا, what is البيات? البيات, that during the time of calmness, during the time of sleep, during the time when everything was appearing that it was under control. That's the reflection of bait. That when everything appeared that it was under control, that's when things basically came in unexpectedly. This is what all of this is expressing, that everything came unexpectedly, and when they least expected any type of bus, any type of might, any type of destruction, that's when it came. What is that supposed to indicate? That's supposed to indicate that many times when we would think that we would have everything under control, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plans, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plots, they basically overcome our own plots. They basically they basically are beyond every single power that we might actually think that we had managed to at least put in some form of civilization, some form of power, some form of success, victory. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one goes beyond Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power comes in to destruct all the climax of their own potential. All right. أو هم قائلون. What is قائلون? This isn't coming from
Aisha, one thing.
Go ahead.
You went into details in fa, and then you didn't say ja. What is ja in Arabic? Is it
جاءها.
coming? Coming. Ja'a is coming.
Right. جاء actually means when something is coming. Okay.
Thank you.
جاءها. It didn't say أتاها, even though in other ayat it would say أتاها. But جاءها is also expressing one thing, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala built in nature, that they basically, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in nature is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically controls the things in nature, and that it basically has built in power that when you go against it, that it will come basically against your magnitude, against your power, against your potentials. In other words, it's a built-in drive.
Gotcha.
It's a built-in drive. That's a very good thing that you actually brought it up, that there's a built-in drive even within nature. You go against it. And when we're talking about built-in drive in nature, we usually think of nature as, the system, the ecological system, or, those basically things that you would see in I guess, in environment. But when we look at the ayat are actually telling us that there are other systems that we may not recognize. System such as economical system, that you cannot fool Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would let us know that riba is haram. Why is it haram? Well, because there's also an economical system that if you actually go against the natural, or at least the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded, that this is what brings in prosperity, this is what brings in peace, this is what brings in justice, because the economical system actually relates directly with justice or injustice. So if people do not act upon the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in how they do trade, how they do, I guess, business, etc., all of that, that there is another system, the economical system, that it is basically supposed to be based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that there is a certain process, there's a certain pattern. And if you go against the pattern itself will come back to you. It will snap at you. You cannot fool the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in this world. It will snap at you. If you choose to steal, the system will snap at you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let that come back to you, and it will harm you. Same thing, you choose to perhaps maybe cut your relationships with your sisters, with your brothers, etc. It will come back to you, and you will need them one day. And you're going to basically become isolated, or probably need them one day, and you're going to find yourself then probably cut off during your most vulnerable times. You choose to probably not be trustworthy. It will come back to you. It will snap in your face. There's no way that you can run away from the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created. Whether we're speaking about the system in nature and environment, or whether we're speaking about economical, social, religious, the list goes on and on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that there are so many systems that control the universe that if you decide, or if you think that you can get away with it, there's absolutely no way that you can get away with it. And when you would become, let's say, an expert in thinking that you can fool the system, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا بَيَاتًا. It will actually snap at you when you would least expect it, just when you thought that you had control over everything and that you had everything figured out. So when you look at ja'a means it comes to you. Ja'a is coming to you. It didn't say ataha, that, even though they pretty much have the same idea, the same meaning, is that something it's coming over to you. And that's the thing, is that there's a momentum that will come, whether you seek it or you don't. It will come at you. Whether you don't have to run to it. It will come to you. It will come to you, it will snap at you, and therefore you cannot go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's system. You cannot go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's structure. You cannot go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's orders. The second you choose to do that, you can probably get to a certain level of thinking that you were successful. It will snap at you when you would least expect it, whether you were probably asleep or happy, probably enjoying entertainment, etc. أو هم قائلون, or even during their sleep. When you say قائلون, the root is not قال. The root is قيل. All right? The root, and here, the root is different than قال to mean to mention. قائلون, that they're actually asleep, taking a nap. Naps are different than sleep. A nap is usually midday. So we're talking about a nap, perhaps maybe 10 a.m., 12 noon. This is when a nap happens. It's not that long. It's probably an hour, maybe 50 minutes long, maybe an hour and a half, but really doesn't exceed that much. It's just a short nap to get you. And it is the sunnah to make and take naps, by the way. It is the sunnah to take naps during the day to help you basically continue the rest of the day. The Prophet ﷺ used to, and the Sahaba, it was part of what they used to do, which is take naps during qaylula, okay, during the time of qaylula. And certainly it would be the climax within the Arabian Peninsula. That would be the climax of when heat, of course, when heat would be at its climax. So the best thing to do is basically hide from that heat by going home and just taking, of course, there's nothing to do. They didn't have iPads, they didn't have anything. So they would basically just take a short sleep and a short nap to get them basically ready for the rest of the day. Okay. Let's continue right there with تفسير القرطبي, and he said ويجوز أن يكون أهلكنا صفة للقرية. He said when it is possible that أهلكنا, meaning we had destructed, that this is speaking about the city itself. In other words, the city itself became destructed, meaning whether we're talking about the architecture, whether we're talking about the people, whether we're talking about what was built there, or probably maybe whatever in, whatever was giving this area possibly the resources to making it a livable place, maybe water resource, perhaps maybe it's residing in a certain area of very fertile land, etc. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will destruct it to make it not livable anymore, or not, somebody was saying something, not be something that is fertile anymore, or something that is going to be as, let's call it, containing the different privileges to making and rebuilding this nation. So what about all those nations? I mean, let's just look at, for example, you're talking about different nations that we know were nations that were there, but then they were destructed. Madain Saleh. Madain Saleh, basically in Saudi right now, in Saudi Arabia. And you're talking about the Aztecs, for example. You're talking about the pyramids. All right, we're talking about al-Ahqaf. We're talking about certain areas. Of course, we know that they used to be nations there, and now they're nothing but history. The Petra. Definitely, it's so obvious that there was a civilization, a great civilization there, but then now everyone perished. Where did everybody go? Why did they leave that space that they worked hard to basically make? Nothing remains, but of course the architecture, or at least the rocks and all the different things that they had built, but nothing else remains. The only thing that we would see remaining is basically, at least in terms of body and all of that, is really the pyramids and the pharaohs right there. And then
the Mayans, Habibti.
The Mayans as well, and in some of the remains, of course, same thing with the Aztecs and all of those. You would see some remains in Africa as well. So you've had all these nations. Where did they go? How did they perish? Why did they perish? And what happened there? Okay. وَكَمْ مِنْ مَلَكٍ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ لَا تُغْنِ شَفَاعَتُهُمْ شَيْئًا. Same thing when it talked about وَكَمْ مِنْ مَلَكٍ. كم من ملك, this is talking about how many angels. It isn't asking you to count the angels. So here to comment on the word kam, it's not asking you to count the numbers of angels, but it's actually wanting you to see the magnitude of the numbering of all these angels, that their own intercession would not be worth unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow it. All right, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow it. And you could see this is, of course, Surah Al-Najm right there. But at the end, you're looking at kam. Of course, I think we had given the different meanings for kam. I don't remember exactly, but I think we had given the different meanings for kam. And perhaps maybe I can see if I have the notes right there to actually show you that one. I think it's in here. Let me see if I can, I think I just found it. Let's see if I I don't know where it is, even though I prepared it, but it seems like it basically got lost, but that's all right, inshallah. All right.
If you
Let's
find them,
continue.
teach us next time, okay?
Yeah, inshallah, I will get that, inshallah. I will get it. You know, when you have all these notes and then all of a sudden you get all these files open up. Okay, let's continue. فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. And of course, right there, he said that fa. And of course, the number of different meanings for the letter fa, we talked about that before. For the letter al-fa, we went in details with the meanings for al-fa, if you remember. And we said the meanings for al-fa, they basically have a number of different meanings for al-fa, which is different than thumma. So let's really quick just go over the meanings of al-fa, and perhaps, you know, just to remember some of the things that we had said. I'm just gonna right there, I'm gonna change this one. Okay, here we go. So number of meanings for al-fa, and I know I had that translated. Hold on, let me see if I can find it really quick. Okay, let's see right there, ma'ani al-fa. Okay, now I want you to give me this one. Okay, and here we go. So there's ma'ani al-fa, and what page was that? Hold on, you can find it. This was 15, so it's going to be around that as well. All right, so we're going to look at the meanings for al-fa right there, and hopefully I can find it on this page as well. So we're just going to find it on this page, at least the English translation, even though we did it before, but I think it's a good reminder of what we're. Oh, this is the meaning of la'alla. Okay, hold on. The meaning of lamb. Okay, here we go. So we found that one on this side, and the English is right after it. All right, here we go. So you're talking about the meaning of fat right there. So you're looking at a number of different meanings since we فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. So you've got the first fa is basically that coordination fa. So then it would give me that it happened right after it, and basically no time lapse, but it was a sequence with immediate succession. Okay, so that's the first meaning. The second meaning, and perhaps maybe you would see that very often in the Quran, to give me that immediate succession indication. The second fa is basically the Caucasian, giving me basically the causality, and the Caucasian fa, and telling me that this is as a result. The reason for that is basically that that with that fat letting me know that this is the reason for it. So is that ayah basically indicating that this is the reason for it? فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا, meaning the reason for that ba's is because they were halika. They had used their potentials for the wrong thing. They basically were halika, and that they basically had went against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then therefore, فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. And then the other meaning is فاء التفريع. And of course, when we're speaking about that فاء التفريع, we're looking at as a result of something, the inference, that as a result and as a logical outcome or a conclusion, and what preceded it is basically as a result of what they had committed. And therefore, you could see that there's another meaning for الفاء. And certainly, I'm just going to go over it really quick right there. So you're talking about the فاء of resumption, and you're talking about the fa in giving us an answer to something, and certainly, well, the fa in immediate succession. Anyways, we talked about that before. So, or the rare fa. So we're talking about an extra or giving us that emphasis, and of course, this is those are just really fast meanings right there, so we could remember that. And inshallah, when you look at the different mufassirin, keep that in mind. When you look at the different mufassirin, so right there, wanted to say that this is in addition to that. So some mufassirin, they actually said, well, this is to mean an addition. So أهلكناها فجاءها, in addition to their destruction, then they had basically that other bas, that other destruction that had come to them. So now you see, just we had seen earlier, right now, the different meanings for the fa. That's why you would see the different scholars in tafsir may see these little portions that you might see right there, just like the fa, they would have different interpretations. The first scholars, they basically said, oh, this is to actually talk about as an addition, meaning that this fa would mean an addition and not necessarily talking about causality, and that, or probably a time lapse. Okay, so this is why you would see that. Now, the scholars would have different interpretations for these letters right there, because in Lugha Arabiya, these letters can mean those. Okay, in Lugha Arabiya, these letters can also give these meanings. So that's one reason why you might say even the translations giving me different translations, or even the tafsir giving me different translations. Is that speaking about a time lapse? In other words, this is talking about a sequence, or is this talking about as a result of what they had committed, or is this talking about as an addition to what they had done, and by overusing or misusing their resources, or that they had perished? What is this really indicating? So now that we would see this one, so you could see right there al-Farra, who's a great scholar in Lugha Arabiya, he basically said that that's really to mean exactly the same meaning as wa. So ahlaknaha, it's like saying waja'aha ba'suna, because this letter fa, he considered it as not necessarily giving me a causality as much as it's giving me an addition. Or other scholars actually basically said, well, no, it is exactly when we're speaking about causality. So they said, فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ, and it said, if you read the Quran, فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ, then therefore there's a certain thing as a result of you wanting to read the Quran, take the time to say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم before you start. So there's another meaning for fa. So that's why I wanted to show you the meanings for fa, in order for you to basically see how it appears in the Quran in different meanings. So therefore, when we do the translation, when we do the explanation, we have to understand that certain prepositions in Lugha Arabiya may have multiple meanings, and then the scholars would look at the context and actually explain what that particular preposition would mean within this context, or they might even have differences of opinions. Sister Sana, go ahead, dear.
I was just saying that, when I was memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah, there's a place where they have وَمِنَ النَّاسِ and فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا. So there it was فَمِنَ النَّاسِ, and other places وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. So it's amazing how you have to be so careful because it's so close, like you said, the additional fa, and then it could mean so many different things. So that's something really new to me. How much that word, that letter, fa is a word actually. How much it's different from wa, and how careful we have to be in how we understand the Quran. Subhanallah. So Jazakumullah khair for that.
Lugha Arabiya is a very intricate language. We usually just think, okay, faja'ah, that's it. Why is that so important? Well, every single letter actually in Lugha Arabiya matters. In fact, even when we talk about conjugation in sarf, that's even a whole different science. That's even a whole different science. Even if, for example, I'm saying tadhakkarun different than tadhkurun, even though the root is dhakara. تتذكرون is different than تذكرون. Or even ستذكرون is different. Every single addition to the root or even prepositions basically have not only one meaning, but they actually have multiple meanings and therefore multiple interpretations, because the Arabiya is a very intricate language. You can't just understand it, just at a surface understanding, but you really need to go deep to understand a number of different meanings, the number of different contexts that they would come in, and certainly the explanations that the experts in Lugha Arabiya or experts in tafsir would say in explaining these meanings, because you can't invent your own meaning. There's a certain structure. There's a certain science. You don't invent your own interpretation, but you would have to go back to اللغة العربية itself. Okay, let's see. So, of course, you could see that al-Qurtubi himself, he basically had a number of different qila, and what he was basically wanting to say is that scholars actually had differences of interpretations. I don't want to say differences of opinions, but differences of interpretations on how we understand, is this a causality, or is a result, or is this a sequence, is this just an addition to what was, all of that. So that's where that qila comes in. That's why you would have a number of different. So the first one, they basically said, the first opinion basically said, well, there were many nations that basically we intended to destruct them, and then since we had, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the we of course is to show glory for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, since we had basically intended to destruct them as a result of what they had committed, that is, then of course that's why they had فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. So therefore the destruction came as a result of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willing that these people basically get destructed for what they had committed. That was the first interpretation. So therefore, أهلكناها, to mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the one that willed that it would be destructed. So think of it as kun fayakun, be and it is. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed that it would be destructed for what they had committed. And then, so that fat right there, with that basically immediate sequence, immediate response, you would get that ba's coming to them, the destruction coming to them, whether it's what they would call natural disaster, etc. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls all the system, and it came to them because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already willed that they would perish. In other words, think of it as kun fayakun, that it was already perished, even though they had not seen that. They didn't see that it was a perished nation yet. They had seen it at that time, that it was a nation that was enjoying the climax of its prosperity. But that's not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was reading the situation. He was reading it as a halika place. So therefore, you had that destruction basically coming in. Okay, so that's the first interpretation. Let's look at the second interpretation. That the destruction is basically going to happen to some of them right there, and that basically is giving us the inference that every single nation, some of them would basically get destructed, and then of course the massive destruction takes over the whole place. So what does that mean? You have a certain group of people perhaps controlling the system, a certain group of people basically let's say, engaging in all that destruction, engaging in all that activity that is against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then, of course, everybody else is quiet about it, or everybody just goes with the flow, that's when, of course, part of that, so you're talking about, think of it as the politicians basically then getting destructed, or the system getting destructed, and then everything basically just falls apart. Okay, so everything basically falls apart, and then فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا, where everything else, or that corruption, basically affects everybody, and everything else falls apart. It isn't just the politicians were corrupt, or perhaps maybe the business people were corrupt, or the capitalists were corrupt, or probably that, or maybe perhaps the military system. No, everything else basically falls apart, and then the whole thing basically collapses from top to bottom. Okay, فأهلكنا الجميع, then everybody is destructed, because it isn't going to affect only a certain group of people that are probably in control or in authority, but it was going to affect every single one. So the corruption would basically overcome the whole system, and overcome the whole society, and overcome basically everyone within that area. So therefore, al-qarya right there would be the hyperbole, to mean that everything within that city, whether we're speaking about land, we're talking about social system, economical system, political system, military system, blah, 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 education system, everything just then collapses. So the qarya would then be a hyperbole to mean everything within that city, within that country, within that area, basically. All right, that's the second interpretation. The third interpretation basically says, وَكَمْ مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا فِي حُكْمِنَا فَجَاءَهَا بَأْسُنَا. Nations and nations had passed, basically, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had determined, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed, that's a better word to use, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed that it would be destructed, that's when they had basically the destruction, or at least the punishment, the torment, come to them. So that's very close to the first interpretation, but it's probably a different way of wording it. Okay, let's go for the third one. And the third one, or that's fourth. Okay, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أهلكناها بإرسال ملائكة العذاب إليها فجاءها بأسنا وهو الاستئصال. The third interpretation, or fourth interpretation, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destructed it by sending the angels of torment to them, and then they basically had come face to face with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's torment or punishment, which basically means elimination. They got eliminated. And al-ba's is basically all the torment that comes onto people. So any bus, whether it's distress that you're living in, or probably different things affecting you, mentally affecting you, at your health, affecting you economically, socially, etc., that's going to be bus. Okay, let's see the fifth meaning here. أهلكناها. The first meaning, أهلكناها, it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically saying that they were destructed at a certain time, and then the ba's was in itself containing all the destruction. So we're talking about the destruction happened, and now you see nothing remaining. That's basically al-ba's. That's the second interpretation. Other scholars, they actually said al-ba's is different than al-ihlak. In other words, it's not a synonym, but it's actually slightly different. What's the difference? Well, the difference is al-ihlak is basically destruction, and he mentioned it before. Okay, what did he say before? Oh, probably at a different ayah. Okay, al-ba's is going to be whether we're speaking about poverty. So in other words, we're looking at the systems today, the capitalist system today. They're probably maybe thinking that, hey, we're the greatest country in the world. We can destruct anywhere we want, left, right, and etc. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bring in the destruction. And then you would say, certainly maybe the destruction to perhaps maybe the political hegemony that they are in, or probably the military force, etc. All of that would then fall apart, and then what happens is that ba's would become basically the result. Whether we're speaking about poverty, unemployment, we're speaking about perhaps maybe social destruction as well, crime rate going up, or probably as a result of poverty, maybe social system as well collapsing, education system as well collapsing. All of that would become as a result of what they had committed in terms of different types of destructions, different types of going against the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether that was going against the economical system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered people to live in accordance with, or whether we're talking about social system, or whether natural system, just like the LGBT. Okay, there was a certain nature that you were supposed to be practicing, of course, the behavior of reproduction, but then you chose to do it differently. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would basically say, okay, so you know what? You went against the nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world in. Therefore, it is going to come back to you, whether you're going to get diseases, or whether you're going to get perhaps maybe breaking the ties of social structure. The list goes on and on. Okay, now here's another thing. Some scholars actually said, well, whether we're speaking about ba's or we're speaking about halak, there really are in different ways, there's similar words to mean really one thing. So whether you're speaking about that the qarya had ba's, or whether the halak came first, it really means the same thing. That's another scholar said. It's just to show the magnitude of the destruction that they were in. So the magnitude of the destruction, whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed it first, and then later came all the implications of a corrupt system basically falling apart, and then we got basically the implications of that coming and affecting everyone. So whether you had said ahlakna first or ba's came first, in the end, basically to give one same meaning, and according to basically al-Farra right there. So same thing he said, just like when you say اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, does that mean that Judgment Day came soon, or at least Judgment Day was getting closer, and therefore al-Qamar basically rips open? Or is this talking about the moon ripping open, therefore this is a sign of Judgment Day coming closer? So, some scholars actually say, well, it is really to mean the same thing, but it is a way of putting in the sentence. It's a way of putting in the sentence, a way of describing this in order to bring perhaps maybe the sentence, the statement, maybe you want to bring attention, maybe right there, اقتربت الساعة, the hour is near, talking about Judgment Day, and therefore pay attention to this one, because this is the emphasis. The emphasis is the last hour, Judgment Day is coming near, and that's the key thing, even though you had seen that the key thing was the splitting of the moon. But the truth of the matter is that this splitting of the moon was actually one thing compared to all of the different events that will happen on Judgment Day. So that's why the ayah proceeded اقتربت الساعة before even talking about the splitting of the moon. Okay, bayatan. Let's look at bayatan right there, and we'll see what al-Qurtubi wants to say in regards to it. He said bayatan to mean during the night, and because yubat, it's just like bay to mean home, just like what we said earlier, and therefore this is to talk about during rest time, when they would least expect it, basically comes to them. أو هم قائلون, when they're qa'ilun, so they're basically, of course, coming in a moment of rest, but at the end, it basically would affect them, that is the destruction, in where they would least expect it. قال المهدوي. المهدوي basically is not any Shia scholar. Al-Mahdawi is a scholar from Al-Mahdiya. It's a city in Tunisia. Okay, so that's Al-Mahdawi. He's Mahdawi to mean He is from a city called Al-Mahdiya in Tunisia, and that's his nickname, basically, not his real name, but that's his nickname. Okay. All right. By the way, Tunisia used to be called Ifriqiya or Ifriqiya. Okay. It used to be called Africa. Tunisia, but it used to be called Africa. This is, and why? Because Tunisia was at one point a great civilization. You know, think of just like when you think of you know, the pharaohs in Egypt, or you think of probably think of the great civilizations in different parts of the world for a number of different centuries. Tunisia was a great and one of the greatest civilizations, and one of the main reasons is because of its location on basically the sea and in the middle of Africa. And of course, there's greenery there. There's certainly shore and certainly ports and certainly trade is possible. And of course, at one point, there was one of the most important universities in the world, Jami'a al-Zaytuna. Jami'a al-Zaytuna in Al-Qayrawan was actually considered one of the most important, similar to Al-Azhar. At one point, Al-Azhar was considered the destiny of education. The destiny of education. Zaytuna was not of any less important, by the way. It was considered the destination for ilm. It was considered the destination for ilm. That is Zaytuna. And subhanAllah, of course, when colonization came in, the first thing that they did was destruct the education system. Abdul Latif al-Tibawi, one very important Palestinian scholar who was assassinated in London, very important scholar, had a number of different books, Abdul Latif al-Tibawi, and he talks about colonization and how the first thing that they had destructed in order to make sure that the people that they colonize do not build in the resistance, the first thing that they destructed was the education system. And he talks about how they destructed the education system to make the education system subordinated basically to whether France or whether UK or Great Britain or whether the different countries, in order to feel that they belong to them. So instead of teaching them as what for Al-Azhar, or probably what is Zaytuna, or probably what Al-Katatib at the time were teaching, which basically is to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to turn to Islam basically, and to teach them Lugha Arabiya. It was replacing Lugha Arabiya with French, just like in Morocco, in Algeria, in different parts, or even Mali, tried to replace it with French or replace it with English, as to be basically being subordinated and feeling that you belong to another civilization. Because when you learn a language, that language becomes your identity. The language that you speak, it becomes your own sense of belonging to where you belong to and who you belong to. That's why language is really important. That's why Lugha Arabiya and learning Lugha Arabiya is really important, because it gives you a sense that you belong to the ayat, the Quran. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiya. That's why Muslims all around the world, it was to them very important to learn Lugha Arabiya, because it basically gave them the sense of identity that belongs to a Qur'ani identity. It was a Qur'ani identity. So, Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiya, to basically, they wanted to feel that they belonged to the Qur'ani culture. What is a culture? A culture, whether you're talking about food, or whether you're talking about clothing, or whether you're talking about language, or whether you're talking about certain customs. So the culture is also belonging to you as making and creating identity. Okay, now out of Tunisia, let's go back to our Quran right there. Bayatan aw hum qailun, al-Mahdawi, he said, well, It didn't say بياتا ولم يقل بياتا هم قال. He said because there is the pronoun which basically goes back to this one. So he said بياتا is more related to that الهلاك. الهلاك happened when they were just in a moment of rest, and البأس happened when they were in the moment of napping. That's quite interesting. Said, you see what he's trying to say? You see what he's trying to say? This one's quite interesting. So this Tunisian scholar, Mahdawi, he was saying, well, we can't necessarily say that il-ba's is the same as il-halak. And what he was reading is that he was reading that il-halak was relating to when they were basically in their moment of bayat, their moment of when everything was stable. So it was like bayat is not to mean necessarily that the person was at home, but no, this is talking about a moment of residence, a moment of stability, when everything seemed that it was going in order. Okay, that's al-Mahdawi's take. He's like, it's not relating to that. And قائلون would basically right there refer to then the ba's came in when they were in a moment of, I guess, physically resting. All right. So just when they thought everything was under control, bayat, everything was stable, that's when unexpectedly that ba's came in when they were in a moment of qaylula. Okay, that's quite interesting. All right, and certainly قائلون is from the word al-qaylula, which basically means the nap time, which is in midday, not during the asr. Okay, there are ahadith that indicate that it is not recommended that people would sleep during asr time. Okay, a number of different ahadith. All right, so that's basically the rest time during the day as a result of heat, of course, the heat during dhuhr time. So that's when that's when they would do the nap. Okay, فما كان it's already okay. Let me see, look at the da'wah right there. Okay, let me just finish this piece, and then we'll basically give you question and answer, inshallah. Okay, فما كان دعواهم. Oh, actually, فما كان دعواهم. I think we need to go beyond al-Qurtubi because he's not commenting on فما. There's something that we have to comment on in relationship to فما كان دعواهم إذ جاءهم بأسنا إلا أن قالوا إنا كنا ظالمين. I'll make just a surface translation, but tomorrow we'll go in detail, inshallah. I'm going to do tomorrow class because Monday I'm having some contractor come over. So I'm just going to do a class tomorrow because Monday I won't be able to do the class because there's going to be a lot of, banging on the wall and it's not going to be good on the recording. Okay, so فما كان دعواهم إذ جاءهم بأسنا إلا أن قالوا إنا كنا ظالمين. And the invocation that they had done when the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came is that they would say, in other words, testify that they were oppressors, that they were transgressors, that they had exceeded the limit. But of course, too late to recognize. The corruption happened, the destruction happened, the torment is there. It is too late to say, oops, I should have actually taken a different route. I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have embraced the revelation. Maybe it was too late because at the end, the torment had already come. There's no return. All right, now we're going to get to tomorrow, inshallah, talking about fama, what that means, and the word da'wah, what does that mean? Does that mean an invocation like a dua, just like in another ayah in Surah Yunus, آخر دعواهم, the last dua that they had made, Is this talking about the dua, meaning an invocation, meaning that they're reaching out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is this to mean that their claim? Is this to mean a claim that they had made, which is to testify that they were basically guilty of being oppressors? Or is this really an invocation? Is this a da'wah to mean a claim, to mean a testimony? Or is this a da'wah to mean a dua, to mean an invocation? That they started making an invocation, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to basically give them another chance, or ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to uplift the perhaps the torments upon them, or whatever, the punishment, etc. Or what exactly is this? Two different meanings and one root. So that's why, because in Lugha Arabiya you could have one word have multiple meanings, that's why you can have different interpretations as well. So we're going to see that tomorrow, inshallah. You could see right there, he said it is possible that this dawah to mean that it was a claim or a testimony that they had made, because a claim has a connotation that there's a sign or an indication of a lie, but a testimony is more likely because they are then making this testimony, this confession that they were oppressors, they were guilty, they were not supposed to be rejecting faith, etc. And that's when they said that they had exceeded the limit. But is that going to be at all coming in their service, coming in their pardon? The answer is no, it is too late. So we will, inshallah, continue talking about that tomorrow. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to hear the questions. And inshallah, let's see, the majority, are they Muslim, not a mu'min? You mean قليلا ما تذكرون right there? So the majority, the قليلا ما تذكرون is that it's indicating very few would have the determination, would have the remembrance, would have the awakening. So تذكرون, certainly if a person reaches the level of التذكر, that's a mu'min. A Muslim would be basically at a place where sometimes they have their shortcomings. They may disrespect their parents. That's a Muslim. They may lie. They may perhaps maybe betray. They may commit something, a major sin, but they're still Muslim. They're still Muslim. Okay? But قليلا ما تذكرون are basically the ones that are free of all the different, at least, shortcomings, and they're not doing it as a pattern. So قليلا ما تذكرون, most of the actions that these people are living in, that is the mu'mineen, is that they're in a state of tadhkira. They're in a state of remembrance. They're in a state of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's orders, in a state of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's might, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance. So they're in a state of that tadhkira, meaning they're in a state of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so let's see. I have to leave, inshallah. We'll see you. Sorry. All right. So if there are any questions,
I just have one. Did Tunisia get Ba'sun and Halak?
Did Tunisia?
Afriqiya, what happened? Did they get Halak and Bas? I'm just practicing what I learned. That's it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So Tunisia basically underwent a number of different stations in history. Number one is that it started out, of course, as a growing place of civilization, even during the Muslim, because it was under the basically the Byzantine rule for a very long time, and before that it was under the Greek rule for a very long time as well. And Hannibal, that was one of the mightiest rulers over Tunisia. Hannibal, he was not Muslim, of course. That was way before Islam, but that was that civilization, similar to the power of the Pharaoh, by the way. when Tunisia became Muslim, it was basically opened and conquered by Uqba ibn Nafi'. Uqba ibn Nafi', that was basically what the cousin, or actually the cousin for Amr ibn al-As. He was the one that along with Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh al-Amiri, they were the ones to open and conquer basically Tunisia and defeat the Byzantine Empire. And that's when Tunisia became, let's call it, a main place for bringing Islam to the rest of North Africa. So along with Musa ibn Nusayr and certainly when Tunisia became Muslim, it was easier to conquer because that was considered as a main city. Think of Washington, D.C. That was considered as Washington, D.C. for the Byzantine Empire. That was exactly like what you're talking about, Washington, D.C. for the Byzantine Empire. Okay, and then you would have Fez in Morocco. That was, think of it as New York at the time for the Byzantine Empire. Okay, so when the Muslims, they basically went to North Africa, that was basically what brought Islam to those areas. Later, fast forward, Tunisia continued to be a strong place in holding at least a place in Islam, in Islamic civilization. And what happened to Tunisia? Why isn't it there right now? Because the French colonization, they emptied Islam from Tunisia. If you were to look at the Maliki books that speak of the Maliki scholars in Tunisia, just like if you were to go to a book, it's called شجرة النور الزكية في أعلام المالكية or من أعلام المالكية. شجرة النور الزكية has chapters after chapters speaking about the scholars that were in Baja, that were in Qayrawan, al-Mahdiya, in Hammamat, etc., Susa. They will talk about all those scholars, those great scholars that lived in those cities in Tunisia. It isn't until the French colonization came in, it basically emptied the Islamic schools that were there and took away Quran. This is very important to keep in mind. If you want to build and revive Islam within any nation, you go back to Quran. You go back to Quran. And which is why I really believe that Somalis are going to be the next generation to basically bring about the awakening in different Muslim parts around the world, because they are connected to the Quran with their Duksi system. You wait and see. No other nation do we know, no other nationality do we know is connected to the Quran as much as the Somalis and Egyptians. Somalis and Egyptians, they're directly connected to the Quran, and you will see that difference actually coming in there. Alhamdulillah, Quran is becoming a place of center to the Muslims in different parts of the world, but inshallah, you will see the difference. Now, when the French colonization came in, and certainly they put their own puppets like Habib Bourguiba and certainly Ibn Ali right there to empty the masajid from the Muslims and persecute anybody that was going to the masjid, and empty al-Zaytuna from the magnitude of the Islamic teaching that was happening in Zaytuna. That's when you started seeing the Tunisian society collapse, when there was no Islam in it. I don't want to say there's no Islam, because there are many that are trying to put their effort to bring Islam back. I'm not saying Islam is empty from Tunisia. But I would say in general that whether Tunisia, Algeria, or whether you're speaking about other Muslim countries, they underwent similar things, but Tunisia underwent a very strict, and I mean extremely strict, type of secularism, where even if you were to wear hijab, it would be ripped off your head. Even if you were seen at the masjid praying more than once during the day, that actually meant imprisonment. So what Tunisia went through is a type of forced secularism that you did not see perhaps Morocco go through this. It was very similar to what happened perhaps maybe Syria, but a little different, because Syria, of course, the population of Syria is different than the population of Tunisia. And of course, the details of all the persecution, at least in Tunisia, and what was happening still did not go to the surface for us to know all the details about it. But, of course, in Syria, we now know what was happening in those prison cells in Syria. It was a completely different type of torture than probably anywhere during our modern times that we know of whatsoever. But still, at least the system was trying to undermine Islam from the society until this day. And perhaps that's why when the Arab Spring first happened, it started and was ignited in Tunisia. It was ignited in Tunisia, and perhaps maybe one day, maybe, who knows, might bring as well the revival in Islam. Who knows? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ya Rabbi, bring awakening to the ummah wherever they may be: Somalia, Tunisia, Morocco, Palestine, UK, wherever they may be. Okay, go ahead, Amr. You wanted to say something.
Yes, I hope you don't mind what says about previous session, just so I understand the reasoning behind, because when I was taking notes, I just lost the reasoning here. In the second ayah, you meant it was to do with the word about haraja, meaning narrowness, right? And that the haraj here doesn't is not talking about the sin, because if it's talking about the narrowness within, and then there was this question, why is it not talking about the sin?
Fair
so
enough.
then yeah, okay, so
So
then your
ahead,
reasoning was لِتُنذِرَ بِهِ. Yep, but what is it about that word that here that it would not make sense to say that haraja here means a sin?
Okay, fair enough. So, فَلَا يَكُنْ فِي صَدْرِكَ حَرَجٌ مِّنْهُ. The Prophet ﷺ was feeling that worry. Why? The worry was because لِتُنذِرَ. So this lam right there are a number of different meanings for the lam. One of the meanings for lam is basically to show, to express reasoning. Okay, لِتُنذِرَ bihi, that lam right there is to show the reasoning behind it. So harajun min, as what is the haraj coming from? What is the narrowness coming from? It's coming from that he was لِتُنذِرَ bihi, that he basically had the mission to warn them. That was the mission. So that lam is to indicate that there was the reasoning for it. So litundira is showing the reasoning for this haraj was basically for al-indhar, for the warning that he was supposed to be doing. Okay, so when you look at fi sadrika harajun minhu litundira, so was the Prophet ﷺ necessarily at sin? No, he was committed. He was committed to delivering the message and warning. He was committed to it. So he was not at sin. but he was feeling the stress, the anxiety from their reaction and from their rejection of this indar that he was doing, of this basically awakening, of this mission of warning that he was telling them about. So then therefore he was not at sin for the stress that he was feeling. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. He was telling him, giving him that comfort, at the end, لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ. You don't control them. Your responsibility is to deliver the message and not necessarily get the outcome. Even if you don't have that acceptance, even if you don't get that acceptance, you are still going to be responsible for delivering the message. And we recognize that haraj, that narrowness, that tightness in your chest. We recognize the anxiety that you are going through as a result. So this is that lam right there, which is as a result. The lam means as a result of that warning that you are doing. So is he at sin? No, he can't be at sin. He's already doing the job. He's already on his mission, but he's worried about the result, whether they were going to accept that revelation or not. Is it clear now?
Yeah, that's clear. Well, next is following up. You used a surah from Rome, Surah Rome, and there's the last ayah is the Surah Rome with fasbir in, and then the last part was la yuqinun.
Right.
Now, here I hope I understood this right.
I'll get the ayah. Don't worry. As you're talking, I'll bring out the ayah.
Okay. So you said that when you are generally doing dawah, doing dawah and you're calling, you should do it with pride and honor, with taqwa. But then here Allah is saying that don't. There are people who the la yuqinun is that the one who's doing the dawah, or is it the one we're doing dawah to who has that uncertainty in their faith?
So la yuqinun, this is referring to the disbelievers.
Okay.
Okay. So let me explain it. Fasbir, be patient in what? In delivering the message. You're going to get a response that may not be expected. They may reject it. They may be violent. They may be sarcastic about it. But you have to be patient in, one, delivering the message. Two, you have to be patient and not give up on the mission that you are carrying. Do not give up. Keep going. Be determined to do it. Be determined to hold on to it and put it into practice on your own self. Inna wa'dallahi haqq. The Lord Almighty's promise is the ultimate truth. What promise? That everybody will be held accountable, that judgment day is coming, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created this world for a purpose, which is to be tested. That's wa'd Allah. That's the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then your duty, if they don't want to believe that they were created for a purpose, they don't want to believe that there's going to be a judgment day and a day of accountability. If they don't want to believe that, well, you just hold on to it and you just be patient. Don't rush in one. They're, of course, rushing, perhaps don't rush in hoping that they would respond necessarily, or don't rush in their torment, or rush in asking them, hey, I want you to be Muslim. And because when you rush it, you might end up really getting even in a bigger stress, because you're expecting that the result to happen right away. You got to give it time. You got to understand that there's going to be an effort that you have to put in, and you will be rewarded not for the result, but you will be rewarded for the effort. Remember this one. You will be rewarded not for the result, but for the effort. You put in the effort. You put in the investment, and that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for. Now, وَلَا يَسْتَخِفَّنَّكَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُوقِنُونَ, and don't let those that do not have certainty. Who are they? They're the disbelievers. They don't have certainty in anything. They're just being lavish about everything. They're just being sarcastic about everything. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, for these people, don't let them dishonor you and not recognize your honor or recognize your place. Your place in what you're really trying to do. What are you trying to do? You're trying to deliver the message. Don't let them see you as a fool. So what you have to have is basically pride in faith. Have that pride in faith and be committed even when others might not take you seriously. They might actually put you in place of sarcasm, etc. Make sure that when you give da'wah, don't give up on your faith in a way to seek their acceptance. Don't give up on your faith to somehow think that by me giving up on perhaps my hijab or me giving up on my principles, that somehow they'll be more tolerant of me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, listen, they're not going to be more tolerant. They're not going to be more tolerant, because what they're going to expect of you is to give up more and more of your identity, more and more on your principles, more and more on what you stand for, because they don't want anything of what you stand for. Because that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَمَا نَقَمُوا مِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ. The only reason why they were persecuted was really because they believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So not until you give up on your faith entirely are they necessarily going to let you perhaps be a part of them. But at the end, just remember, لا يستخفنك. Don't give up. Don't lose that connection with your faith in hope of their acceptance. They're not going to accept you. They're not going to necessarily give you that dignity by, if you think that if I would loosen my hijab, perhaps they might be more inclusive to me. If I show them that I'm not necessarily religious, that somehow they'll be tolerant and they'll love me more, and they'll probably give me spaces and probably give me a promotion or whatever it is. Hold on to your Islam. Don't let that shaitan make you give up and not give weight to your deen. Stay strong. وَلَا يَسْتَخِفَّنَّكَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. I hope I explained it.
Yeah, you did. Jazakallah khair, Ustad.
Allah yahfadak ya Rabbi.
Ustad,
Any other question, dear?
Yeah, sorry, I have some. Just it's because when I'm making notes, I just need clarity on some things.
Go ahead, dear.
You asked a question. You said, "Is it I guess it's just for us to think," but you also reference it to the tasrih. Is this discourse directed at the believers, I think, or at the Prophet ﷺ only? But you mentioned that the scholars had different opinions, and one opinion was that it was directed at the Prophet ﷺ, but it also includes other Muslim nations and people. What are the other opinions? Because I just have that opinion.
No,
Because you mentioned
the other opinions. So you had one opinion with this, not this ayah, the different opinions we were talking about. Page 160. Let's open it right there in Surah Al'araf. So is this فَلَا يَكُنْ فِي صَدْرِكَ حَرَجٌ مِّنْهُ لِتُنذِرَ بِهِ وَذِكْرَى لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ? Is this one exclusive to the Prophet ﷺ? Two, is this to the Prophet ﷺ and to the believers? Three, is this really the same opinion as the first one, but it's a different way of putting it, that it's directed at the Prophet ﷺ, but it is as an example for the rest of the believers to take. Okay. And, sometimes it's just a different way of wording things. So not always that I would say, although they might list it in the books of tafsir, like, oh, these are 5 different opinions, but sometimes, they overlap, but it is stated as if it's a third or a fourth opinion. So when you say, yes, it's directed at the Prophet ﷺ, but it's also for the Muslims to embrace as well. I mean, that's the first thing, is saying the Prophet ﷺ and the mu'mineen, but it's just a different way of saying it. I guess it's giving more commentary rather than giving it as a separate numbering of who really is it directed at.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so I have this is just so everything, I'm trying to process everything, and it's quite heavy. And to take away from things. You said you were just talking about Tunisia, that like the first thing they did was destroy the education system. With Islam, like its mission goal, am I correct to understand that Islam wants to for you to worship Allah, to put Allah at the center, but also to build a system like an Islamic government around
You're a
Allah?
very
Is that
smart girl. You're a very smart girl. You're a very smart girl. Okay. Fair enough. That's a whole okay. I'll summarize it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That's the first ayah. I want you to, put it, maybe we could do it this way. I could actually get another separate sheet. Okay. And here we go. Okay. We're gonna do this right there. Okay. So the first ayah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Okay. إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Okay. That's the first ayah. Take that one.
Yeah.
Okay, think of it as A. The second ayah, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك. طيب, here we go. 2 ayat. I want you to look at these two. The first one is وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So therefore, we're looking at the main reason for our creation is ibadat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to basically worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, here it is. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what does worship mean? Where are the areas of worship? Here we go. إِنِّي جَعَلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً gives me an explanation. Khalifa basically means a creation after another creation. So therefore, there was a creation before Adam. But this creation didn't have the privileges, the tools that Adam had. What did Adam have? What did they say? Well, you look at the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah when he says that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically explains to them that he's creating another creation. Let's go to Surah Al-Baqarah and actually see وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. What did they do? They basically said أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَن يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. They basically said, well, are you going to create another creation? يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا. That is going to cause what? Fasad. Destruction. وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. And is going to cause cause bloodshed. But wait a minute, how did they know about the bloodshed anyways? What bloodshed? What bloodshed are they talking about? Who is doing any bloodshed here? All right, that's where, of course, that comes in. And when you see right there this area, and they were talking about fasad, they were talking about bloodshed. What bloodshed? Adam didn't even get created yet. And plus, the malaika don't know the future. They don't know al-ghaib. So what bloodshed? And plus, jinn doesn't have blood. What creature is this that was created before Adam? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to demonstrate, not for just in demonstration just like that, but it was wanting to demonstrate one key thing, which is for us. The Quran wasn't revealed to the malaika to basically take it as their place of information. The Quran was revealed to you for you to know. So what is it? That's why the malaika, they said, well, we're doing the job. We're doing the tasbih. We're glorifying you. They thought that the main job, just like the main job was to always do وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. They said, here we go. We're doing the job of ibadah. But they had a very narrow definition of what ibadah was. They thought, okay, well, here's the tasbih. We're doing that. We're glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's ibadah. But they also recognized that that one other thing that they needed to do, or one thing that one was supposed to do, was basically, just give me a second. Give me a second. My mother's calling me, so I have to. Okay, so what they wanted to basically inquire is that, wait a minute, so here's that nation that was already there. Who knows who these creatures were that lived before Adam? They were causing bloodshed, they were causing destruction. So they understood that in order to do ubudiyya, it is more than just doing that spiritual submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It also involves that people would apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would apply basically the ethical system, the social system, the different social justice, the different systems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted. That's why they said yufsidu fiha, which is basically, I would say, a comprehensive statement, which would include any type of stability, any type of justice, any type of bringing in the application of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's orders and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's patterns basically in place and structure. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, there's one thing that this creature, that is Adam, what he will be given is basically something different than you, what you don't have. Alam, that ta'lim, this cognitive skill, this ability to understand, this ability to process, this ability to basically, this ability that you don't have, not even the malaika. So then he exposed it to the malaika. Can you do the same? So he basically wanted to show the malaika that this creature has something you don't have. So, أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين. Malaika, can you tell me the names of these things? So they said, لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. We don't have that power. We don't have the power except with what you had given us. We don't have the cognitive skills to process information, to process names of things, how things function. We don't have that. إلا ما علمتنا. That's to show that malaika were ordered to do one thing, which is worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and basically apply what he is giving them as in orders. They only can be obedient. That's an angel. Only can be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet, قال يا آدم أنبئهم بأسمائهم. Now it's time, Adam, tell them what their names are. Tell them the different things. Now, قال ألم أقل لكم, when Adam عليه السلام basically said the names of things, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells the malaika, make sujood. Okay, now the malaika are asked to make sujood, but then what is the statement from this statement to this statement? What is this trying to amplify? It is trying to amplify that there is a center of evil that basically is then going to be as the center, that is a center of accountability. So that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him another type of a privilege. This other type of privilege number one, let's see, what is that? It's basically the cognitive skill. Privilege number two, that's basically that zawja, that marriage in Jannah, that was privilege number 2. And privilege number 3 is to basically eat and drink at peace. But there was one piece of challenge. وَلَا تَقْرَبَا هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ. Don't approach this tree. But then أَزَلَّهُمَا الشَّيْطَانُ عَنْهَا. That's when the shaitan comes in, seduces them to eat from the tree, makes this narrative that was going to be the tree of prosperity and tree of what they will basically get. So then this story is coming to this key word. قُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ. This is the key thing. So now what are we basically supposed to be doing? Number 1 is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that's a comprehensive statement, comprehensive wording, but the details of it is basically to implement the definition of justice, the definition of structure, the definition of ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we were given these skills, cognitive skills, the social structure. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that the place of fitna, that the place of test, the place of challenge is basically going to be shaitan. فَقُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا وَقُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌّ. This is the key thing, that there's that challenge. You will be challenged with your inner drives, finding basically different ways to perhaps think that this is giving you eternity, this is giving you prosperity, this is giving you peace, when in reality it is nothing but a manipulation coming from shaitan. Did I explain that, dear?
Yes, you did.
So what
But
should we do?
how?
فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى. If you find that guidance, فَمَن تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Whoever follows the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's no fear. Why is there no fear? Because if they're following the structure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had laid out in both the aqidah and the sharia, then that is going to lead to security. When you say لا خوف, it's no fear / security. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. No distress, no anxiety. Why? Because everything is in place. People are feeling not only secure, but they're also internally feeling psychologically stable, feeling religiously, spiritually. The society itself is going in the right direction in terms of structure. Did I explain it?
Yeah, no, you did. No, you did. So, like, okay, I live here in the UK, and the system here is I know deeply it's not aligned with Islam. But how on earth would you? I know a lot of Muslims are doing grassroots level work, but you're still within the system. Like, how?
Right now, there's no Muslim system, dear, no matter where you go. Okay? There's no Muslim system. But they do vary from one place to another in the society and how much it's embracing from the system. When we say system, we're talking about aqidah. We're also talking about ethics / sharia. All right? So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically lets us know, أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. The earth is wide enough for you to migrate, to see a place that helps you attain your level of spirituality, attain your level of deen, and help you grow in your closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So at the end is that we have to, 1, invest in making the system, and 2, invest in being in a system that is better for our children, better for us, better for our own deen, and basically grow in that way.
You know, so just your the point about you have to create a change in this, making a system.
Right.
Just theoretically, I'm just saying this. If you were to make a system in the UK, technically you have to overthrow that system, no? Because there's no way you can
So it does, sometimes to say overthrow, that's a very big word, because little by little, we make a change. Whether at school, you probably can only do a student organization to probably defend your right to have a prayer space, or probably defend your right to make sure that one professor who was defaming the Prophet ﷺ basically does not do that, or another that you would have the right to have halal food in the canteen or the cafeteria. And so every single person has a certain platform that they should be working in. All right. And therefore, you will be held accountable as based on how much are you capable of doing and what you had done to change. So I'm not telling you, well, let's go and go up on changing the political system, but I would say, hey, if you can make it to the parliament and actually speak about the Muslims and defending the Muslims' rights, and probably speaking about how, we're supposed to be defending the Muslims from the discrimination that they're probably facing as a result of the Brexit or whatever it is. Okay, hey, you can do that. You can go that far and probably study what you need to study in order to go in creating a system of security and safety for the Muslims to practice their religion. Well, do that. But if you are feeling that, well, I can't do that, but I can, within my school, I can probably do something different, or perhaps maybe within my job, I can probably advocate for the Muslims to probably get Salat al-Jumu'ah time, I'll do that. I'll probably, advocate for them just to get that space. So it depends on what resources you have and your ability to, let's say, advocate for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, advocate in tansurullah yansurkum, or advocate for the Muslims. All right. So every single person will be judged based on their own potentials. What potentials do you have? How can you put your potentials to basically give in tansurullah yansurkum? What can you do? Maybe somebody else, a brother, can say, hey, I've got a beautiful voice. Can I make an nasheed? Go ahead, by all means. Right now, Turkey, it was just this guy that became a trend on, I believe, TikTok or something, making nasheed. And right now, the children, everybody is singing this nasheed, talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which contained key elements in Aqidah. Here it is. It was just a nasheed affecting the system in Turkey. Nasheed. You would think that in order to affect a system that somehow I needed to go and get into the parliament, but it was just a simple thing. It was just a nasheed. Someone else, it might be that it's a video that they might be making on CapCut or whatever it is, and it was that video, and that probably went viral, and it affected millions and millions of people, and gave hidayah to them. Here we go. You just made one video that was probably maybe just a minute or even less long, but it was that video that got you to Jannah because it guided millions of people. Just, think of that. What potential do you have? You know your potentials. You know the area and the platform that you are capable of working in, and therefore you need to service those potentials for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did I answer it, dear?
Yes, no, you did. No, you did.
All right. So, did you have another question?
No, instead of
Okay, this is
think
it.
about what you said, then process it. Ask you tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah. All right. So inshallah, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant